Teninga so terang dana yung kanga tenim. Aso terang kan chatchit yang kanga mo tsamala shito delakan samjigin.
Good afternoon to everybody who has come here today.
Teninge terang shito nga so chatchit kan nangdon de kang rezina teni gum gyapshir ka teni jirne ta lantong zea teni ka res.
And the topic for this afternoon's teaching is going to be related to shamatha and insight meditation.
Teni gum gyapse kita nga so teni semkam go jongder she ligzres.
So when we talk about meditation, what we are referring to is a kind of training for the mind.
Teni tangbo nga so gum gyap go wi jimsen de kang de ha sarwoz teni ha kor go res.
And what we first need to know is actually the reason why we are meditating or why we should meditate.
Teni nga so shawa leka kang lena yang teni thomar nga so de le go wi jimsen de kang re shawa leka de lena tela teni mjew kang yo kre to thomar nga so ha kor go ya te res.
Whatever kind of action we undertake or whatever kind of work we do, we first need to understand the rationale for doing it. And not only the rationale, but the result that we can achieve in doing this work.
Teni perna nga so lipo jonder machina teni nga so lipo de la teni nat jata mandra mambo yongre ti nat de la teni nga so chowa na la dungur mambo yong teni na cha dungur mambo yong teni mche yang yak boz teni mayong so mche teni to tondang damba teni shetham ko mare je pe nga so lipo to jonder machina.
So if we don't exercise our bodies, then we will easily become sick. And with sickness and illness, much suffering will result in our lives, we'll have much inconvenience, and it will prevent us from doing a lot of things.
Teni ti jimsen nga so tsama teni hako yo ti teni nga so mambo teni zupo la jonder ndra mambo shek yo res.
So this is something that virtually everybody understands, and on this account most people exercise their bodies frequently.
Yena nga so semkam ga tola teni jonder she goya ta nga so mambo ga hako yo mares.
However, the need to train one's mind is not something that as many people know about.
Tana nga so mambo ga teni jonder teni she ki yo ki te hako yo mares semkam go jonder ze ki teni jonder ze yo ya te yang nga so mambo ga hako mares. Nga so semkam go jonder ze ki yo ki te yang yo pa te yang hako mares mambo ga.
Even the fact that there is such a thing as training the mind is something that not many people know about, or not everyone knows about.
Te yin nga so mambo ze ke teni nga so semkam go jonder te la teni tongchong she ne teni lang ro yo res.
And for this reason, many people do not attach much importance to the training of the mind.
Teni nga so muze ki te Gandhi la zege yore zene na nga so muze ate ngupo kang nga so driba rezena nga so shete teni ngupo re vembo re shekate teni sem rez sem tang vembo nikala teni ki chopate la teni nga so muze le teni manta yore.
So what does it mean, in fact, to be human? What is a person? A person is comprised of both a physical form, physical matter, and the mind. So we are a composite of both of these things.
Teni nga so muze ki do ngupo kyangba yang mare, teni to di sem kyangba yang mare, teni ka choba de yemba de teni thomar nga so teni ngunzen she go res.
We're not just our physical matter, and we're not just our minds. We are a fusion of both of these things, and what we need to do at the outset is recognize this fact.
Teni nga so muze ate ngupo dang sem nika ga chokba yendi teni nga so ngupo cha de la ngupo khorang go gumkho chik da teni nga so sem de la sem khorang go gumkho teni gumkho mandawa ni yores.
So on account of the fact that we are comprised of our physical selves and our minds, we have needs in respect of both of these halves. So needs in respect to our physical form and needs in respect to our minds.
Teni nga so zupo tini gungko de kangrezina pena zamata chida jota tini khawugta o teso tamchepo ngacho tini zupo ta wembo ngupo tini gungko res.
So our physical needs, the needs of our bodies, are things like the need for food, the need for drink, for sustenance, for clean air.
Teni teso mayona teni ngacho teni zupondo teni demo thapkamare zupondi thola dumar data manda mambo teni yungres gunko teso mena.
And if we are not able to fulfill these needs, then we will experience suffering in our bodies.
Teni sem telayang tetang jawa zaka ngacho semkham telayang teni tetang jawa yang teni gunko mandawa yang chiores.
And just as our bodies have their needs, so too do our minds have needs of their own.
Teni semkham ka teni gunko ta kangrezina teni ngacho teni yang takpa tawa masoso la tawa la jamanda mambo yore tinani tawa yang takpa gore ndashi yang takpa gore teni toso teni ngacho semkham ka teni gunko res.
As for the needs of our mind, there are a variety of opinions, in fact, on what these are. But what we do need to arrive at is an accurate view of what our needs are and an accurate awareness of the needs of our minds.
Teni ngacho zupola goya teni zamatang teni chitang teni khawtang teso thamayang yo teni semkham la goya teni yang takba tawa tang yang takba samlo tang teso chama yo sona teni mokchik ta zo mot teni dethang ga ngane ne thap kres.
It's only after we have satisfied the physical needs of our body, whether in respect of food, water, air, etc., and then the needs of our minds in terms of a proper understanding, proper views, and proper thoughts. When these both aspects are brought together, at this point can we really talk about living healthily.
Teni teni kinani kang mena yang teni pena teni lipo gungko yakpo mena da teni semkham ga gungko yakpo mena da kang mena yang chit mena teni ngacho dethang ga ngane yarje san ro tan choa ke ro tan to so shetab ko mare teni dungar mambo yung dos yung res.
However, if one aspect of these needs is lacking, then we will not in fact be able to live in a happy and healthy manner.
Teni te ngacho khorang ga teni ngubo ga teni chunyet te ngubo khorang ga neser te teni ziri te ngacho tapadang rewa yo mare je pe na ngacho te chushen kan ga chushe ta mo she ta yana nangba she ta yeshi she ta teni ga tapalang rewa yo mare kangkanglang rewa yo mare khono ngubo rang ga neser te teni ziri ngacho tapa shinkan zgi na mo li te teni ziri tapa mo shinkan zgi na teni ziri yana nangba yenare teni ta yeshi yenare.
So characterizing the human like this in respect of its various needs is something that is just a fact or the basic essence of what a human is. It's not a religious characterization. It doesn't rely on having a particular religious faith, whether it be Buddhist or Christian or otherwise. It's an objective statement of what it means to be human.
Teni ngachu tarta teni ngachu choa na la teni dungar mambo zu yong ndu jite so thamche po choa na la dungar dam mambo yore te lipo kyangwa ga yang mare sem kyangwa ga yang mare kap sang ngachu lipo gum kho yak po me pi jim sen ji teni dungar yong ndu kap sang ngachu teni sem kham ga thola teni sem kham gon do pa te yak po kong ma tha pa. In
the course of our everyday lives, we experience all manner of sufferings. They're not necessarily exclusively physical sufferings or mentally derived. Sometimes when we don't or are unable to fulfill our physical needs, we experience suffering in this regard. And sometimes when we're not able to satisfy the desires of our minds, we also come upon suffering.
Teni chaparta ngaso teni perna tastan rawo inna teni ngaso chisho ko teni chowa ngubo chowa te yargi teni sonyo pa teni ka inna teni ngaso go dungar mangchi ate teni sem go tode yong dungar te res.
But in the current day, when we live in a state of relative material affluence, most of our suffering does in fact derive from the suffering of our mind.
Tani ngama nikmna nguma razina tini ngubogun sowa yargi maswa ti nikm razina tini semga tola yang dumur yo re tan mambo zut tini nga so ta lipo dumur rez ngamaina.
In eras gone by, when we did not enjoy the same standard of living that we do today, then whilst we did, of course, have experienced mental suffering, a lot of the pain that we encountered was due to physical suffering.
Tani nga so mamang chiwa za ko wang shina roa mir ko lorgi ko wang shina mamang chiwa za ko wang shina perna tangbo lig dumur tini zaje me pa konji me pa te so mambo yong tani zaje konji te so yopi jini ta sem go toni dumur mambo yong tani shine tani shirtang mir ko lorgi la tin rizre lorgi mandawi ne kamna dumur mandawan duze.
In general, looking at the course of human history, it has tended to be the case that people began with suffering related to their physical lives. And then as their needs for food and clothing were satisfied, the mental suffering began to increase. So with different stages in human history, different sufferings or kinds of suffering have ensued.
Tani mchiglam so na ze nga so roa mir rigzeni tani mashit mchiglam so na mchikun soa na la na te dang ra bore be na kap sing aso semkham go dungar da mambo yore kap tini lig dungar da tani mambo dos.
So even in respect of an individual, one person, this is how things operate. From time to time we will have more mental suffering, and other times we will experience more physical suffering.
Tindi indi pena nga so musti na pena hwanjur ko tini chakin te tini te kyobo tindi imbi nerkamna tini ta lidang lig dungmur tini mambore tini pamjur ko chakin te yar yakpo chaksarwi jini tini semtok ko dungmur ta mambore.
So during times when we are not in the most flourishing of economic circumstances, we may experience physical suffering, but after we've resolved our situation in this regard, then mental suffering will begin to multiply.
Tini tinji dungmur tela tini nga so ina musdang si na te nga so sama tini dungmur tela ha cha chakayo re tini ti dungmur te para mepa sheya ga tondagla tini aso tini chu shawa lekkan ramra mambo pe na rigni mambo tini lakhsar mambo tini samlo mambo to so sama dungur to so par meba sheya ga to tondagla tini sama ga tini ga samlo mambo tari samlo mambo chun ten ra was khsar chun shi tini lakhsar mambo tini khsar to chi ten ra was ga tini shawa mambo le ndu ya te aso dungur to so meba ga tondagla res.
But these kinds of suffering, or suffering in general, is something that humans really fear. And in order to stave off or get rid of this suffering, humans have engaged in all kinds of endeavors, whether it be inventing all kinds of new technologies, studying all kinds of cultural pursuits, all of these things engaged in with the purpose of eliminating this suffering.
Tini yina nga tsu tini dungmur te tan par mepa shepa ga tabshi ti tola tini nga tsu ruwa mirik zinanda nga tsu mamang chi shu zuka ti tola tini nonchir halipa chenpo shi yores.
However, generally speaking, in terms of a method for eliminating suffering, the majority of people are very mistaken in what they believe, in what they regard the effective method to be.
Tini nonchir te kang re zina nga tsu mamang che wa zuka samlo tangpa yana nga tsu dungmur te tsangma te tini ta shirur ne pe na nga tsu la chu ngupo me pandra ota yana pamjur me pandra ota yana katak nyanchak me pandra ota yana thup gosa me pandra ota wangcha me pandra ota tini shirur ke tini sir nga tsu la dungmur te yung ndug samne nga tsu mamang che wa zuka te sam go yore zi nga tsu dungmur mambo yoya ga gimtsin te tsangma shirur na yore samne and
this mistaken idea lies in the view that most of our suffering comes from external factors around us. So a lack of riches, a lack of power, a lack of status, or whatever it might be. Most people attribute their suffering to causes and factors in the world around them.
Teni tenji ge samlo to yo charti teni nga chu teni sosola dumur moyong wa tang dewa yong yi tond teni shor kana ngupo mambo pamju chim yarge se tang ngupo mambo sak tin ra wota teni soso go teni mangchak nyanchak teni to jepi thawla chonje ta teni soso go no teni thop kosa ta teni yo yi tond la teni nga chu shor la leka mambo le yo res.
So based on this idea that suffering comes from the external world, most people, in order to address this suffering on this level, engage in accumulating riches, in achieving high status or fame. In short, they direct their energies precisely to this external world.
Tani shir nga chu dumur mambo zo to shir ne yong yo rezina yong yo re rete nga chu tani dumur chama shir ne yong yo sambi samlo to
Of course, this is not to say that none of our suffering arises from the world, the external factors around us. Of course it does. However, to think that this is in fact the entire source of our suffering is very mistaken.
Tini ten norwach chigrese, norwach nipa de kangrese na tini ngacho mamangchi ga ka samlo tana ngacho chowa na la yo pi dumur ndra mambo yo pate tak thamche po mar mepa shia tang dumur ta thachu shia shepala teni nga cho shurur ke teni perna gormo mambo yo anda ta sosola thop kosa chimbo yo anda wangcha yo ba tendis yo na teni nga cho dumur ta thachu shi thop kore samni nga cho tendi tak la thapsi tendi tak la samlo tang de teni yang ten chwa chigre ten de norwa ni pa de reason chwa ni pa de reason.
So the first mistake is the idea that suffering is derived from the external world around us, things in our external lives. And then the second mistake is based on this first mistaken view that the way of going about addressing this suffering, getting rid of it, is to work at the level of factors in our external world too. So amassing wealth, achieving status, and engaging in efforts like this.
Teni ton ngoma tolapshana nga cho teni li tang sem gi dungur teni soso yewa shene teni nga cho she gore teni li tang sem ge dungur ni khaka yendi teni li ki dungur me pa tang sem gi dungur me pa she pa ga thapsi te ya thapsi susu yo gore thapsi chik yong ko mares.
However, what we need to do is to distinguish, in fact, the needs, our physical needs, and distinguish between these needs and the needs of our mind, our psychological needs. There are solutions and methods appropriate to each of these needs. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach to both.
Teni nga cho li ki dumur teni me pa she ala ten per nga cho teni chu soso go te shawale ka drup chu chung jap ji na da le ka le ji na da to so la tin ni teni nga chu teni chu chowa ga chakin to so teni chakin to so tam chu po teni drup ji to teni nga chu li ki dumur to me pa she thap gres.
So in terms of addressing our basic needs for survival and doing work, doing some business, making some money, ensuring our conditions are in place, this is a way for addressing our physical needs.
Tani ta sem go dumur tintu me pa she gona tani yang thapsi jamba chi go re je ta ti thapsi jamba ta kang re je na tani nga cho gum jab ke ta sem kum go jongdr she ke tere.
However, in terms of addressing the needs of our mind, we need a different method. And this method is meditation, training our minds.
Tani mang che shu tu nga cho dumur mang che shu tu tini nga cho chirwa la tin jong yo re norwa tang chirwa ga sam lo la tin jong dos.
Most of our suffering really comes from mistaken thoughts and illusions in our mind.
Tani nga cho chwa ga na la namgin tini nga cho tini to nga chu tani samlo mang che shu zu tani to chirwa re tin chirwa tele par gar matna tani dumur te cho chawa ni me pa she pa tani de she thong ko maris.
Since most of the suffering in our lives stems from these mistaken thoughts, then without being able to transcend these kinds of thoughts, it will be very difficult for us to move beyond our suffering.
Tini terang aso tari semkam ko jongder tini gum tini namba tamche bola tini ngochu shek yin ngochu shek tila rimba ni yoze gum mandawa ni ngochu shek yin.
So today we're going to talk about meditation as a method for addressing the needs of the mind, and I'm going to talk about 2 levels of meditation.
Tani ti nani chit kangrezena ngachon soa ga nangla tini so sem marke patang sem nangla dumar mambo shon perna tonser kana dawota yana tele jamba ga tini to kherkyang ga tini samlo kherkyang ga nadawata tini na mambo tini yongo yo te marme pashi yare chigdo gom chigdo.
So the first type of meditation I'm going to talk about is one that can be applied in the course of our everyday lives when unhappiness arises, or for people who suffer from depression, feelings of loneliness.
Tini ti gom tela tini ngacho manche azga tini tamba nyirja ka gom zegendu tini amarkala tarkib chimbon ro ndu lobda chimot sogona la tela jimjing mambo shekendu maumba na tele kya tarkib chimbon ro sares.
This kind of meditation is frequently referred to as mindfulness meditation. This has become very popular in the United States, and in the future is probably likely to become even more widespread.
Teni ti gomdo teni tarta teni ta ngacho lobda chimbona la jimjing shekendu teni tandawaz ka teni ta mambo z ka teni nyamli nyam shekendu ze te hale ba yakbore te na ngacho teni man tone penatini sem marke pada teni yong ene kamna teni man tone teni ta sem chonz teni kebo yong ata teni she ke yoreta te thapsi mare yakbo mare je tele gum jabna ha chang yakbo yores.
So this kind of meditation is currently being researched a lot in universities. It's being widely practiced, and this is a good thing. It's certainly more preferable to taking medicine when we are in a state of mental discomfort. However, there are certain insufficiencies in respect of this meditation practice. It's not possible to say that this kind of meditation will be able to completely eradicate our suffering.
Ti gom ta she thap gare ti gom ta nga chu dumur che chong la tong gare che chong re do re dumur chawani me pare ka mar dumur chong re do re dumur ta chong re sona teni nga chu sem ka nala dumur ta myong thap ka mare je ti chura ta saro yo mare dumur ta me pa do re.
This kind of meditation is able to reduce the severity of our feelings of suffering. So it's able to make a feeling of severe suffering become less severe in the way that we perceive it. It's not able to completely eradicate suffering at the root, but it is able to reduce the intensity of our feeling of suffering. Porwa kanga nangla teni cha chongzi nyong lugna teni cha ga teni jowa de nangla yo re ta nga chu thong ne kamna nga chu ngarmu da wo ma to pa teni cha ga jowa de nyong thok mare pena ten da boris. So it's like if we had a bowl of sweet soup and in it we put a tiny pinch of salt. When we drink the soup, even though there is a little bit of salt in it, because of the overwhelming taste of sugar, we wouldn't really taste it very strongly.
Teni dumur ni pate kangrezena nga chu dumur te gum ni pate kangrezena dumur me pa shi che gum ni pate kangrezena teni nga chu dumur sama chawa ni me pa shi ya teni gum jamba chigres.
So this being the first kind of meditation, the second kind of meditation, this one oriented to eradicating suffering at its root.
Tani ti dungur ti gom ti niki nangni gom tamboto tani nga tsu chula tapa shimkhani na gom chokore chula tapa mshimkhani na gom chokore tenda waz kape na nangba inna gom chokore yangna nangba mayim batini taga tan zambalang chulu jambazla tapa shimkhan zgi na yang gom chokore te chama ti sik gom na gom chokore es.
And this kind of meditation is something that can be practiced by anyone, regardless of whether they're a Buddhist or they have another religious faith.
Tani gomte sasakina tani gomna gom chokoreta ina ti gomte yinjin nangba garezi nangba ga tani jongona la shapas greta ina tani ta jambatso gomna gom chokorezi.
So this kind of meditation, even though anyone can practice it regardless of their background, is derived from the Buddhist tradition. It's a Buddhist meditation.
Tani nangba mayim ba tani jamba namla tani gom yo reze ngama penda jagr ke chulungda ota to sola gom tani yo reta tartanga chu mambo kusha devati tartanga chu mambo zikitini shuchok thola tani chama tani lobta chimo tan do so jimjigshi tani she yo sa gom tenga chu nangba gom zgreta ina te gomna tani nangba mayim na te gom chokores.
Meditation is not purely something in the Buddhist tradition. The Hindu tradition also has meditation traditions. However, the kind of meditation we're talking about now, and the one that is being researched widely in universities, is a Buddhist meditation tradition, even though, of course, it can be practiced by anyone.
Tani gom nipate tani karte gom gona tani ta namba mashina tani namba shini namba yani the soramba jinto tani namba nangla nyamlim shia mambo yore te so nyamlim mashina tani shetham kumare tani gom karte nipate gom gona tani namba mashina tani gom thap manduze gom nipayna namba sanji ba she gore mashina gom ki yo mareze gom nipate namba tambo to sama sas gom na chokoreze tini nipate tini ta namba mashina tini gom dio mareze tomba ni kitawa ta zogba chembo te sore.
That's all. Okay, so I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The first kind of meditation is one that can be practiced by anyone irrespective of their background. The second kind of meditation is one that requires becoming a Buddhist and having Buddhist goals in one's practice.
Tani ka rambani obati nani tani kangin nanja ngachu tani thomar ngachu hak kor goya de kang rezina ngachu chua nana yopi tani dingmer mambo yong yo ate ngachu samna shilog ne yong yo sambi dingmer te so mambo zu to shilog ne mare ngachu rang sem ga nani yong doze.
So first of all, what we need to understand for the first stage of this meditation is that all of this suffering that we have commonly attributed to coming or deriving from the outside world is in fact produced by our minds.
Tani sem ga nani yong doze ate jim kandila zegrezina sem ga nani yong ate dingmer mambo zu to ngarang so nam tok ko wang ga tini yong doze nam tok ko wang yong yore zamba ga wang yong yore sin zamba ta nam tok zena chipare tinani ti wang yong doze.
And when we say that this suffering comes from our minds or results from the mind, what we mean that it is the result of various mental constructs and attachments that we have.
Shirtang tini nga so dewa yan nanda dingmur yan nanda dewa tang dingmur ziki to kangris la ngunzin go rezina te nga so mog tini chorwa mog nga so mog li tang sem go chorwa manda was res chorwa zela ze go res.
When we are differentiating between what is pleasurable and what's suffering, in fact, how we really do this it really is us distinguishing on the basis of feelings in our minds or in our bodies.
Tani chorwa ta nyamsum nyungkhan ta sik nyung yore ze pe na nga so lipola tani orma da tinti shina tani chamo ta namo tinti chorwa ta yung gore ti chorwa ta nyamsum nyungkhan ta sik nyamsum yung gore ze na tani nga so shiba ga nyamsum yung yore ze shiba.
When, for example, various feelings occur to us, or when we perceive different feelings, then we ask, in fact, who is it or what is it that is perceiving these feelings? For example, if we incur an injury, a wound, we have a feeling of pain or stinging. In that case, what is it or who is it that is perceiving this feeling? Well, it's our consciousness, it's our sensorial consciousness.
등물 명다 맘용지지 대와 명다 맘용지지 때니 가서 시바레 되니 시바가 코랑 그 냠용 소로아즈라 대와다 등물지가 오래 마도 바 대와다 등물지지 실로라 요파즈 마레지.
So these feelings of happiness or unhappiness, pleasure or displeasure do not objectively exist in the world outside. They are feelings that our perception attributes to different experiences we have.
Tini ngacho tarta tini rentang katawan tini rentang katawa shinshil obazereze. Ti nandela mangchiwa to shinshil obare ngacho rentang katawa tila jirchu mavjivna. Ndi rentang katawa ti ngacho la dumar hajang mambo tini dumar mambo tini kidyung gres.
Value systems these days are frequently very mistaken, and in fact, if we don't make reform to our values, then we will generate only more suffering for ourselves.
Tini ngacho chowa nani dumar mambo to ngacho tani rentang katawa tila jirchuzu javjagna. Tini ngacho chowa nanga dumar mambo zata mepa changro gres.
If we are able to make changes at the level of our values, then in fact much of the suffering that we usually experience can be eliminated.
Tini nani tini rentang katawa ti dumur kandri ke kenduzina khashiz ngacho tini jiktin de pena ngacho mayim bazula yimban rawo tini norwa ga tawa shinche lokba tini top tini yonggenduze.
Some of our suffering, for example, derives from the fact that in the world around us we imagine things to be a certain way when they are not.
Teni mashi bijimsinji yonggereze ngachu te korang ngachu mayim bazla yin samne ti zongwa tang don chit ngubo neligze gona ngubo korang yakbo mashi bijimsinji teni ngachu na semgana la dungar mambo yonggereze.
It's because we really don't understand the true nature of things and how they operate that we cling to ideas of things in fact existing when they don't, and on account of this we experience suffering.
Pena ngacho tini mulum ter miwi nekamna mulum mujimbi nekamna ngacho karti mulum yamba mashina tini mulum ganala tini ter ngacho thoi tini ngubo thamchibo ngacho la tini kapkaps dewa ta kepa ke kare kapkaps jikta ta dumur ke kare tani chuwa ga nang ta chikpa chikyang rese.
So as in a dream, if we don't realize that we're dreaming, then all the things that happen to us we treat as real. So they may alternatively bring us happiness and pleasure, or at other times fear and unhappiness. Just as a dream operates, in fact, so does our everyday life.
Tani ngacho mulum mo ne kabna mulum yimba de shisongna tani ta dumur chama tani ta lamsang tema tak ta menjo ndozi jiktak da dumur da teso chama tema tak ta menjo ndozi mulum de yimba kha go sona.
If when we realize that our dream is just a dream, then any suffering that it has caused or any fear that it is caused immediately disintegrates, it disappears immediately.
Tani ngacho mulum zikita dan chowa zikindini ki khabar ta kangrezena ticho thong tela thong jang tini mulum tela ngacho tini tela tini mulum zegre ticho techo rambo jang tini ta mulum tela tani ngacho chowa zegre ti khabar ticho rang thong ma to khabar yo marez.
How are we to understand the difference between a dream and our everyday lives? Only in terms of the length of time. A dream is something that usually takes place over a relatively short period of time, whereas our everyday lives is something that are rather long in duration.
Tani pena terang ngachon nyam dindilan dindi sokhang zikanalan tsokni tani ngachon dindi khabda shikayo pan chachip shikayo pan de mulum reta ngacho dindi mulum zimbi yo reta yana ngubo tong thola dindi yore ze gona ripi zunglu ko thoni tini ya shigona halipa shik kamores.
So the fact that we are gathered here in this church this afternoon listening to a teaching from the point of view of from the theoretical point of view, if we are to ask whether or not this is a dream or in fact whether or not this is really happening, it would be in fact quite difficult to answer that.
Yeah. Ini ya siapa kemarin ngau pena tadi nanang kelola tani tong cuci kelola tani jana ke Tunggu tani lobda cimosi ke tani jiksho kenala jik tani jiksho kenala tani ngaso tarta gende ngaso malum reta tani ngaso unso are zini tani jiksho zutni tani lobma chola tani lang jab tani chigi oreze tani zeng doze tani jab thap kemareze.
In 2014, high school students taking an exam in China were given the essay topic, is this a dream or not? And weren't able to respond to this question. And the students didn't pass this essay.
Yeah. Teni lo nishes sabdan sabje tidizka kongrorto teni ngacho teni lama yujinoro teni ngarang chola teni trawa korang gusum teni stigyamne teni tela langyab shosone teni the ngacho tarta malum reta ngacho teni chuare sone teni chumchu gyabare teni ngacho mambo samlo tani choa imbi gimse mambo shate teni gimse chikyang gimse ngomazo chikyang sha matabares.
Oni shisake kungona. About 27 or 28 years ago, Lama Ishinobu or Khenpo Khenpo's root teacher composed some writing on this question of whether it right now is a dream or in fact it's really everyday life, and gave it to the students. They contemplated it for a long time, and he asked them to respond to this, to provide their own opinions and reasons. Many of them tried to come up with all kinds of reasons as to why, in fact, this present moment was real. However, none of them were convincing.
Yeah. Tadi ngaco nyangma tini lama mapam jamgun mapam rambochi zizi yore tini korang tini sung nala yang ngaco or malam dang tani ngaco choani ka chobaz gyab yore ze chobaz gyab ni malam ka zena ngarang demba yin ze tani chowa ka zena ngarang demba yin kyo zamba re ze ni tani chobaz gyab yore tani thaji jigta ni tani ta zamba rin ro ke ma to ta ngarang demba yin bi gimchen zi
Jamgum Minpa Rinpoche penned his thoughts on this question, characterizing a debate between real life and a dream. And real life was claiming, this is true, this is really happening. And the dream claimed, no, this is a dream, I am right. And they argued back and forth. But at the end of the day, neither was able to produce convincing reasons as to whether they were true or not. So at the end of it, both appeared as false.
Teni indi ta ngaco teni mjingthar teni ngaco teni te domsik de kare jena jelun domsik de kare jena pena machisi ka teni lo jathamba ka teni nga chu machisi ka nyamnyung te teni chitsuni ga nala teni thong shi jangna teni tela malum ze gores jelun jena jingjera waya teni te nga chu machisi ka teni machisi pena lo jathamba yena lo jathamba ga teni nyamnyung machisi ga nyamnyung te chitsuni ga nala teni div jangna chong yujana yaso teni shi jangna teni tela malum ze gores.
So, in conclusion, we can say that if the contents of 100 years of human life were condensed into 2 hours, this could be called a dream.
Teni chitsu ni na la shong teni malum te nga so rambo shi ni lo ja tham ba shi jagna teni tela matse ze go gres.
And if we were able to extend these 2 hours out into the length of a lifetime, then we could call this life.
Teni tema to ko chapar chi yo mare nga so chapar shi go na shi tham ko mare nga to nyamnyung ko go ni shi tham na shi tham ko mare ripi jong lu ko jimsum ko to ni shi go na shi tham ko mare.
So, with the exception of the length of time in question, there is no difference between everyday life and dream. There's no difference that we can assert in terms at the experiential level or at the level of argument or theory.
Teni ta nga chu malum ti nga chu mu chama ga tini shen la tini zimbare ze kharang demba mari zimbare ze ni teni nga chu chama ga tini sha ka yore nga chu chama shi re ze.
Many people say that dreams are false, they're not true.
Ya teni nga chu shi re ta yin na yang teni ta teni nga chu malum ga na ni ser sa cha pi ji su teni nga chu o ko zimbare ze ni teni ze re ma to ba nga chu malum mu jin bi ne kam na nga chu zimba yin ba ti shi yo ma re.
However, it's only after we wake up from the dream that we say, oh, that's false. While we're still in the dream, we do not have this idea at all.
Teni malum te zimba yin ba ti nga chu chama ha ko yo re nga chu same ke yang len ge re te yin na yang teni nga chu malum de zimba yin ba ma shi na teni malum ka nga chu la dingmer mambo njik tak ta dingmer mambo ke yong gen de wa ze.
So even though everybody knows that dreams are not true, if while we are dreaming we don't know this, then dreams bring us all kinds of suffering and all kinds of fear.
Teni yin ti teni nga chu ta dingmer mambo ze nga chu dingmer ramra mambo ze teni ta yong ge yo re ta ti yong sa de ga ni yong ge yo teni nga chu ha ko re ze teni sam lo ta na dingmer gum jong khong de ka yin ta nga chu ha ko re.
So we need to isolate or identify, in fact, what the source of our suffering is.
Teni kandi teni wana ta dungmer ta kandi yong ben de zena nga chu ngupu kang dang kang yin na da khorang tong go thola demba yin na da khorang tong go thola zimba yin na da nga rang chu tela demba re samni sim go thoni zimba ha chang chimbo shi jagna teni ti dungmer ke yong re.
And what the source of this suffering is, the source of this suffering is our tendency to grasp onto things, whatever they may be, as being intrinsically true.
Teni ngarang chu pena lakpa go ngupo chilan den di tambo shini teni zong jana teni ngupo de nga chu lakpa ga nang ge shit chimbo zo ka teni ten sona nga chu zummo de chan de ka she ma shi na de nga chu zummo chat do re zummo ka she ma shi na pena nga chu teni to ngupo den da was lakpa ga na lan ji yo na teni to lakpa ga dum ni teni den ji yo na ndo jamba za kan ten sona nga chu lakpa den di ka shi shi go re ma to ka ma shi nam zo cha ga re ze.
Okay, so it's like if we're tightly grasping onto something, tightly holding it with our hands. If we are to suddenly pull our hands away, then without opening our hands, we won't be able to remove it from the object.
Yeah. Tini tin da was ka pe na nga cho so rang la yo pi wang cha yen na da so go tini che pam ju yen na da tini so go chu thop thang yen na da tini mambu z nga rang so sim ga na ni hal le pan tini tambu shini tini zung yo res.
Whether it be our riches or status or fame. These are things that we typically cling to very tightly in our minds.
Teni yinna teni ngazo pamjuri nanja teni wangcha tang pamjur tang teni lipo teni zupo detang tang deso tamjepo teni kapsu teni ngazo lagna ni par tonggoya da ngazo la teni rawa mepa ga toni ngazo ta par kapjan roa teni yores.
However, there are times when we need to let go, as it were, of our clinging, our grasping to these things, whether it be our attachment to riches and status, or our physical health, or our bodies.
Teni di kapsa ngazo sem parteni kapshi shigo reze sem kapshi shigo re matoba gate sem kamashini sem gatarong dendi shini zona teni dungar halipa chimbo sem kanala yongore sem kanala teni dungar mambo teni kapsi yongores.
So it's when we actually lose our grasp of these things that our minds need to open like our hands. If we continue to cling at times like this, then we will experience great suffering.
Teni sem para kapshia tila ti tapshi tila teni gum nipa tereze ngazo terong shati gum nipa ti tereze.
And the method for opening our minds or letting our minds go at this time is the second kind of meditation.
Teni ngazo terong shati gum tambo tang gum nipa re gum niti nani gum tambo te teni peda ngazo chowa ganani leka ganani shongwis non shing jata kapse sem market pata. So the
first kind of meditation that I spoke about this afternoon was a kind of meditation that we can use in moments where we have a lot of pressure or stress as a way to reduce these feelings.
Teni tambo te na ta ne teni ta nga su yang nyamlin shi na pantok yore susu sem la pantok yore ti gomu nipo te hajang ka teni karchen bores.
So whilst this first kind of meditation certainly can bring us benefit, the second kind of meditation is able to eliminate our suffering completely at the root, and it is an amazing kind of meditation.
Teni tambo gom tambo tenge teni do dizu shakins.
I'm going to briefly speak about the first kind of meditation.
Teni gum tambo tela ngazo teni da tapshi shirtang tapshi haliba teni mambo yoreze gum gyablik tela mambo zindoze.
In respect of this first kind of meditation, there are many different techniques available that can be used.
Shirtan zambalang teni ta chulik soso gangda gangla yena teni gum gyapchar teni soso la rang soso gum gyapchar manjawa teni yosares.
In the world today, among different religious traditions, there are each tradition has their own respective kinds of meditation.
Yena teni gum gyapchar ka teni tapshi chi mangshu ta njamja haliba mambo yosata teni namba ga teni jong dereze.
However, the tradition with the most diverse and numerous forms of meditation is the Buddhist tradition.
Ti nane kyang namba ga nane kyang teni ta boba ga teni ta namba di nala bojin natan di nala chi haliba mangshu reze.
And within the Buddhist tradition, the Tibetan tradition in particular has a vast spectrum of meditation practices.
Teni boba bojin natan ga nala teni gom mangshu imbi gemsan ka rezena teni bojin natan ga nala sang ka teni ta chu nga zupe na teni ja ga chu ta teni nga chu nyan tu chu ta te so nala maybe teni sang mambo zi oreze.
And the reason for this richness in meditation approaches is due to the fact that the Tibetan tradition is the Vajrayana tradition.
Teni ti sang ka na tela teni ta thapshi yang gom gyablik ka thapshi nga chope na shirtang ka teni thakba chimbo ta teni nyantu ka thakba te so na la mapshi pi sha mipi teni yang gom thap ha lepa mambo ti na la ndoze.
So within the Vajrayana tradition, there are many kinds of meditation that not in the Sutric, the Mahayana Sutric tradition, or in the Theravadan traditions.
Then ti gum te solatini, ti tapshi te solatini, teni, teni ngaso to dungur de mepa she gore. Te yena ti nani tapshi te la ngaso chikte nerkavse tini ngaso namba mayna, pe ngaso namba la tapa machine khan. Or tendis yana chulug la sawane tapa mungkan zina, namba tapshi te korang ka peshu she nan dukan doze nerkavse.
For the time being, or for temporary benefit, it is possible for people who are not Buddhists to make use of these approaches.
Teni chupota teni ta tangone chani namba shine korang arang namba yenze teni namba ga chutu so ramba jin da chama de nyamlim shine teni rol go res. Ni bada.
The second of this, or the first kind of meditation, is the kind that anybody can appropriate. The second kind requires Buddhist faith and then following a graduated and progressive path of meditation practice.
Teni ta namba ga nani gum chupu mari namba ga tawata namba ga teni gumta teni namba ga teni jamba ga teni rantang ka tawata so chama chachangzi teni tanglin she go rezi gum ni na.
The second kind of meditation requires that not just the practice of the actual meditation practice itself, but also an embrace of Buddhist attitudes and values and views.
Teni gum tangbo te yinna teni ngacho namba ga tawata gumbata teni jamba chama tanglim shi go mare khorang ga ti nani namba ga thapshi chingda ni da teni zi teni khorang ga gang khona te nyamlin shi ni te shi jangna chokore jamba te so khorang ga nyamlin ma shi na chokore.
But the first kind of meditation doesn't require the acceptance of a wholesale acceptance of Buddhist views and values. It's appropriate to extract, as it were, a couple of effective approaches or methods from the Buddhist tradition and put these into practice.
Teni tambo te pe na nga so chulug la tapa machine khayin na da chulug tapa shin khayin na sedang se na yang teni di tapshi to korang ka semla pan tong ro re je ko ta pa yo na me na semla pan ko yongdir shi ya tapshi zure deni ti pan tong ro re.
So the first kind of meditation is a kind of training that simply brings benefit to the mind, and it will bring benefit to the mind regardless of the faith or religious background of the person practicing it.
Pena yoga ta varese pena yoga inna teni tambo ti jagar ke chulu ke korang ke nyamlin zereze inna ti jini teni nga so chulu la ta pa yong ken men ken mambo teni korang so lipu teni detang ke tondak la teni nyamlin she yore te shina chokore pena ten ja bores.
It's rather similar to yoga, which originally was a practice in the Hindu tradition, but over time became a physical practice that spread all over the world, and it's a practice from which many people gain physical benefit.
Tanita gum kang yin nan ja te la shetang asu namba gana la tini gum jablik mambo sha yore ta ngi terang tini ngaso gum tangbo da nipo ta tabde po z nyung tini ngotu shigins.
So in the Buddhist tradition, there are many different meditation techniques and methods, some in greater detail and less, but today I'm going to describe in relation to the first and second kinds of meditation a very practical and simple meditation methods.
Tani namgin ngaso tini chowa nala ngaso semte tini ta namtok te haliban de namtok mambo de yong yore namtok te kajik chikang tini ndukmare semte tini perna jamchu la tini rlap chimbo yo pata was raising ngaso semte.
Usually our minds experience all kinds of distracting thoughts. They arise in our minds like waves in an ocean.
Teni ngaso jamchu go rlap phajang chimbo tini to yongwa ta ngaso semti nala tini ramra yangna kap sa hajang gachewa yangna kap sa hajang sim dugba tenji mambo de yongna teni ti teni ngaso sem mara teni ne matapa sim jiwa yong matapa teni regre teni ti topko teni ngaso sem kanala mabdiwa mambo yongre machpa.
So just like waves in an ocean, we often feel surges of extreme happiness. We also feel surges of extreme unhappiness, and it's due to these different surging feelings that we are unable to experience calmness in our minds. And on account of not being able to feel this calmness, we experience suffering.
Tani ta nga so gum tela ni pa kan tin na tin gum ga thapsi tela tin ni nga so nam tok tin di chimbo yo pa te tani mar jechong se ta ne den di jechong la tong go res.
So really what we are attempting to do by the first kind of meditation is to reduce the size of these waves or surges of feelings or thoughts in our minds.
Tani thama nga so tani sem ga la nam tong de yar nam tong da ma da kya te me ni tani par sem tani ne sa chi ga thola thik sing da bo thola ne tham sona tani tela sem tela journée zegre sem jemo jiwa nga la ne thap kres.
And after extended practice, when we are able to bring these surges of distracting thoughts, to reduce them in their intensity, gradually reducing them until they become like a flat line. When we reach this stage, then we can say that we have reached a stage of calmness or equanimity.
Tani ta tinji gone nga so wona nga so semte tini tambo ta nga so semte hale ba tini nam tok mambore tini nam tok te chechong so ne nam tok me ba tinji she gona tela thapsi kang yo zena tani thapsi tela gumtham jamja ge yores.
So in terms of reducing these turbulent distracting thoughts in their intensity, there are 9 concrete methods.
Teni ti thapsi mjawar ge te teni nga so gum tambo teni ngun zba ne teni gum te teni yakbo z teni mjik zong go war ka teni nekap te chang chama te teni tinalan di yores ti ge tinalan di yores.
And these 9 methods encompass the stages from when we begin our meditation and until we bring it to its conclusion.
Teni ti gepote nekap mjawar gepote nga so pe na bok chu na la ina bojit nam tang na la ina ti gepote rmo lam ni tini ta bojit nam tang da ja la yore ja ga chan zi ti na la ti ni po ti ni rmo la tini ngo chu she yore rmo chni.
These different 9 stages within a meditation or within a session of meditation practice in both the Tibetan and Chinese traditions are depicted in visual format. They're shown in pictures.
Teni jaga nala ina jaga teni chang nala teni ti rmo go tela teni alang gi rmo ze alang ze na walang ge rmo ze jaga jiu niu tu ze ti zok doma ge teni rmo ze chere teni ze ko ne ngo chu she kan dos.
In the Chinese Chan tradition, these 9 stages are depicted as the 9 oxes, sorry.
Yeah, teni boba nala teni ta ti jene gomser ta teni chigda lambo chi ta xiang lambo chi chigda teni chaba chi o to so sum go teni goni teni ngo to she ko yores. Monk zero.
Oh, okay. The first being a monkey, the second being an elephant. This one being
lambo chi teni mo. Yeah, jaba.
Oh yeah, and a monk. These are the three ways that these 9 stages are portrayed in the Tibetan tradition.
Teni ti ramba ge goni teni to nekap tambo ni pa samba teni ge goni teni ngo chu she ko yore zenga zo bo ju kana tang na la.
So within the Tibetan tradition, these different moments or different stages within a meditation session are depicted in these nine stages.
Teni ti nani ge nani ngacho nge terang kang shaken zena tambuk sum to shaken yeze ge nani.
And what I'd like to talk about today are the first of these three stages.
Teni ngarang cho tambu teni gum jam kang ge le tambu ba teni zena teni ti gebo nani shima tesu tezu halipakar chimbo mare ngama simbo te kar chimbo res.
The most important among these 9 stages are the first 3 of them, especially for someone embarking on the practice.
Teni tambo sim ge nani tambu te la kang ze ge zena njokpa ze ge zena cho borke ke nala njokpa ze. Njokpa ze na kari njokpa ze na chis ke ton da zena ngacho gum jam na pen na ngarang ge sim ge nala teni martak ban rao yana teni chu ta ngupo kang ze teni sam nam rang ge sim te ti thola par jagni teni ani na pen na ngarang ge mu ke teni shang ge loma zla tani nge mu ni po teni shang ge loma zla tani teni nge sim te yang teni ti shang ge loma ti thola jagni o nge sim te yu mu te chu sam lo mambo mo tani nge shang ge loma ti thola sim te par jagni te din dugna te la njokpa zigres.
So the first of these stages is called resting. And it's resting is like, for example, bringing my gaze to the leaf on this plant, and by concentrating on the leaf, I bring all of the other distracting thoughts in my mind into a state of rest.
Teni ngacho karti chorang nangba zgina teni nangba sarje ba teni pena sarje shakja ta ba ke thangkha o teni zngola jerne teni thangkha tela pena zhigang dan teni de ba de zhigang ze re yana chimbo ina zhigang chongchong ina sormo ji o teni ge che chongchong zu teni pena dingola jerne teni ni ge tela tani teni de gores nangba zgina.
If you're a Buddhist, you could perform this kind of practice by looking, fixing your gaze on a Buddha, a tanka of a Buddha, a tanka maybe the size of half an arm span, putting it in front of you and focusing on this.
Teni karte yeshi chuluk patin resina korang yeshi gdini kelatana chokore yana ti jadam te latana chokore shizja. Tela tana chokore zi tik tela tani tana pena jadam de hon la jerne teni jadam go jumdo ti thola mugni po ti thola ta teni semyang ti thola par jerne teni tana chokore.
And if you were a Christian, you could do the same thing with a picture of Jesus or with the cross by putting it in front of you and focusing on it with your 2 eyes and bringing your attention to this.
Teni kyorang karte tapa tsawani menken chulu gang tapa yang menken tenisina ni orang shanglo masik latana chokore jamba remo kang romas latana chokore tenis latana tin jugres.
And if you were a person of no particular religious faith at all, then you could do the same thing by looking at the leaf on a plant or by looking at any picture in general.
Teni tawi ne kamna ngaso teni mug ni pote kola targore teni mug Zumdib mambo teni mambo nyangamare, teni yarta marta mambo nyangamare, mukti titola tan gore. Teni mugni potagatani, teni semyang titola par jerne, pena sanje shakjata pa kayinanda, sanjigina, sanjigin di mensum de latana chokore, tugar latana chokore, otena sanjig kalatananda, yeshi latananda, jadam te latananda, shangaloma latananda. Gantar tini ngatsu mugni potang tini semte tasak tola tani tini yu ya yandro mandro moshe par tini tola par tani tini degore tela semti tola njoze greze par njoze apena ngatsu chendo tini di tola njoze randa ngarang semti ti tola jare ti tonda greze.
So regardless of what it is we are using as our object of concentration, of focus, whether it be a picture of the Buddha, an image of the Buddha, focusing on the spot between his eyes or at his heart, or whether it's a Christian some kind of Christian iconography or the leaf of a plant, what we need to do is focus our two eyes in a very single-pointed way upon the object, not blinking, not looking around from left to right, and in so doing bringing our minds to rest on the object that we are looking at.
Yana pe na nga cho nyangji ta was gomna tini nga cho sim gna la nyangji chipo ti gomne tini nam to jam me ba shine nga cho sim ti nyangji ga to la par jerne tini nyangji chipo ti sim gna la samna de la njog ba jegres.
And we can also refer to this kind of resting in terms of compassion meditation, where we focus our minds exclusively on compassion and generating compassion. We do not allow our minds to wander to other things. This is also a form of resting.
Tini simti tola jarni tini namton ramada mambo mebashini tini jarni tini nipi nekamna tini nga chu thomer tini lojong shi nekamna jondur shi nekamna yin rampon tu thub kumare tini pena karma shekhanda karma chingda yana karma ninda tini mato yin rampon tu thub kumare ti tola tini maton tu thub kumare.
But this first stage, resting, is not something that we will be able to sustain for a very long time when we first set out. Perhaps at the beginning we might only be able to do it for 30 seconds or a minute or a couple of minutes.
Teni njog matavzena kare zena tenga so sem kanala namtok namanda mambo kiyong gare teni nyuk teni ta sachila ta ne nyuk ta yo na sem ko teni duk mare teni sem ro re ze teni sem jalan ro re teni yarang bunduk tab ko mare.
So when we say not being able to rest the mind, what we mean is that even though our eyes might still be focused on the object, our minds have wandered off in another direction.
And
when this happens, we then need the second method.
Ginzena gintani nipati gintani pena nga chu marshar kayona pena chitba chila ginzeg mareze chmambo nditi varma chatandona tini tila ginzeg reze gintani ro atila zegre tindi nga cho pena simte tini titola jagona tini korang janzla sona yang layang shadong titola parja gore titola gintani ne gore tila ginjo zegreze.
And so this second approach that we take is called continual resting. It's like a drop of water. We can't talk about it being water in any kind of continuous sense, but when we have lots of drops together, like a river, then we can call this continuous or continual. So what this refers to is bringing our minds back to the object of focus when they wander.
Teni genjog zigiti teni tondakta nga so kowa tab debo zig toni sharna gin machet par nepati la zegresi gin machet par neparesi pena nga so tangbo nga so teni nyarji gomyona teni yang namtok jambazi yoni nyarji mayimba mambo sem kana la kesona te gin chaparesi o tendi mayimbar nyarji te pena karma nga karma ch tendi kana la nyarji takda gin machet yongwa tendi zla zegresi genjog zigiti tendi zresi.
So this continual resting refers to not breaking our concentration in our meditation. So, for example, when meditating on compassion, after 5 or 10 minutes, our thoughts might wander off elsewhere. So the continual resting is really referring to establishing or maintaining a continual focus on our object.
Teni ti kapsanga so gintat ne gona te haleba kamu yoreze haleba kamu yore nga so le tambu bazina gintat ne thamkamare savane ne thamkamare.
However, at the beginning in particular, doing this is extremely difficult and is probably not something, in fact, we'll be able to do.
Yina te kyongmare nga so mumtni jondrshini karte tini nga so ti kirmajna jondrshina kale gin rambo ni thyongore tambu te thamkamare da.
However, it is something that if we persist in our practice, if we persevere, that we gradually will be able to achieve.
Teni ti kapsa teni ngaso semna la chabdukshi govi tontak chigyo resi ti kapsa.
And at this time, there is something that we need to mentally prepare for ourselves.
Pena rungo lanzak kanga runzak teni lister bazginna teni korang ka semla chabduk go resi ta korang teni rungo lanzona kabli mambo jab go re samdi teni chabduk tu korang ka sem kana la yor go resi. Pena tin rawaz ka ngaso semna la chabduk go resi.
So when we talk about mentally preparing, it's like a mountaineer who's going to scale the peak of a mountain. Before he or she does this, she needs to mentally acknowledge that the difficulties that they are likely to endure.
Teni pena ngaso namgin ngaso choa ganala gum marja pine kamna ngaso sem kanala nam tongta manda mambo yungu yoreta yona te ngaso hako yo mareze.
Usually in the course of our everyday existences, all kinds of, discursive thoughts and distracting thoughts arise in our minds, but this is not something for the most part that we are aware of.
Teni tanga so gum jabjati teni ha lepa nam to chimang song pe na so teni namgin gum majipi nerkab le teni chik teni ninjir samjir jinjir ke teni nam to chimang la song dawo.
However, when we first begin to practice meditation, it seems that these kinds of thoughts are in actual fact like they're multiplying in number.
Teni ti kapsa teni nga so mambo zaka teni simla teni kandi samro rezena o ta ngi gum jabna yak po yong samare ngi gum jabda teni ta gum tham samare ngarang ta gum yo samare ngarang la le tang karwa yo samare samni. And it's
at this point that many people become discouraged, feel that they are not able to persist in meditation, that they're not going to achieve good results, that they're not really cut out for it, and on this basis abandon their practice. But this really isn't a case of not having the good karma for meditation or otherwise not being cut out for it. In fact, every single person is like this. This kind of mental occurrence is the rule for every individual.
Choa nangla gum marji pine kamna dindi nam tok mambo yongo yore tarun dali kyang mangs yore ta ti kapsangi dang marji pere nge samlo ma tang wi jimsin ji ma shi pare tarta nge gum jab jab pine kamna ngarang la nam tok kandi mambo yo ba de ngarang ga shi song are ma to ba nam tok je mang sa song ma re samni dindi sam go res.
What we need to tell ourselves at this moment is not that our discursive thoughts are increasing or multiplying, but rather that before we began to meditate and observe our minds, we in fact had no idea about the nature of our discursive thoughts, or even that we had them at all. So really what we are experiencing is an observation of the discursive thoughts we had in any case, and not their multiplication or increase.
Tani ti kapsa nga cho rang la senso she go re senso she ne o ta kyung mare Tata nam tok mambo nduta ti kyong ko mare nge nam tok ta jimang lan ro mare jinyong lan ro re o dindi ne kabla ta mus ta se na le tambo pi kap sa nam tok mambo yo re ti kyong ko mare nge yin dam manda teni gum go sam ne tin kap sa tini sam go re.
And so we need to comfort ourselves at this point, recognizing that our discursive thoughts are not multiplying, that they will get less, and that we need to persist in our practice.
Teni ngaso teni tari ngaso tapsi sim yo pinen ka nipati tere tine kamna jini ki ngaso gin thne gin rambo she etamato tar goze hajang rambo she tab kumare ta karma ni da sam da nga da tindi kana la gin ma che par teni ngaso teni sim tindi ne to moto tar go res.
So this is the second stage of this practice, continual resting, which refers to the being able to focus, to concentrate on our object for an extended period of time. At the beginning, it won't be for very long, maybe only a couple of minutes, but this is the second stage.
Tani ta tabshik samba derezi. Tabshik samba dila lan tin jokbazi gerezi. Lan tin jokbazi na lan zena kang zena pena nge tangbo tini nyangji da bozu gom yona tini ngaranga semte tini jambazi la sone nyangji mayimba tini tondak mepa ndura mepa tomi kishawa mambo semka nala tini sam yongrezi. Ti sambi ne kamna nge yang ngaranga semte laryang shir yongne nyangji ga thola paran jokore tela lanze na yangkirti thola paran jokore o tela lantin jokbazi gerezi.
So this third stage is repeated resting, which refers to bringing our mind back to our object of concentration after it has wandered away. So as if we were doing meditation on compassion, if our minds were to go off onto somewhere else, repeated here refers to that repeated action of again bringing our mind back to our object of focus.
Teni ti kapsa teni ulan tin jokpazi tin jokgona ngachola ti kapsa teni tornang shi goya ani yoze ti kapsa.
In bringing our attention back, there are two things that we need to keep in mind.
Tornang shi go sa tangbo de kangrezina ngacho simte pena nyangji tangbo ngacho nyangji gomgoyona teni ta khorang nyangji maimba tondak jambaz pena ngarang chimsang ga tondak raboda yang chung jabje teni ji khefsang ga tondak rabot teni jambaz sam goyona teni lamsang teni ngarang ga hako gore ongi nyangji gomgomendu ngarang ga jambaz sam ga ndu sambate lamsang shi gores.
So the first thing that we need to keep in mind, or the first thing we need to do when our minds wander. So say we are meditating on compassion, the moment that we realize our mind has wandered off, perhaps thinking about something to do with our families or maybe our business or something like that, what we need to be able to do is immediately recognize that our minds have wandered off. This recognition that our mind has wandered is important.
Teni kartite mashina pena ngarang tangbo nyangji gomgoyo na ta nga semde nyangji mobgumni teni tondak jambaz teni samlo tang teni she ko jita ngarang hamako na teni nga chok karma ch teni gnala teni namchok nyangji sawani gomgumare korang jambaz samgoyo re ta ina ngi teni simla dagbo magimni teni pichu mambo cholak tang rores.
If we're not able to recognize when our minds wander off, then it may in fact be the case that while we are sitting down meditating, as it would seem on compassion, our minds have actually gone off somewhere else, and maybe for even 5 or 10 minutes at one time. And this is a great waste of time in our practice.
Tindi yendi tini ngatso tini nge pena ngarang tambo nyangji gomgoyona tani ta nyangji maimbaz tini semganala tini chanyuna Titi lamsang tini hako gore ze lamsang o ngi nyarji maimbaz ngi nyangji gungumadu ngarang ka jambaz sa samlo tangandu samne lamsang chang gore te tondak tambores.
So the first thing is this immediate recognition that we are no longer concentrating on what we are intending to concentrate on. I'm meant to be concentrating on compassion, but I'm no longer doing that. I'm thinking about something else. This is what we need to train ourselves to recognize.
Tini tondak nipate gangrezena Teni pena tadi nyarji gomgoyona tata ngarang semgo nyarji mugumne teni korang jambaz samgoyona teni shisona teni shipatsamji chokomareze ta shima tata teni korang semti serchi yongore serchne nyarji ga thola par jerne o mumtni nyarji ga thola teni tan jogores na tela lantin jogbaz gre yangkir nyarji ga thola par teni jerne teni she goreze te tondani pares.
Simply knowing or recognizing, however, that our minds have wandered off is not enough. What we need to do after we realize that this is happening is bring our minds back to our object of focus. And it's this bringing of the mind back that we are talking about with repeated resting.
Teni tenji go ni teni yang rambola kale jondrshe go re nga so simtela jondrshe atela hachanga thapshi go re pe na nga so tendro jondrshe na pe na ta tini to khalo ti bandao lambo chi teni ndrjong je re tenji she bandao to so la tini thapshi go re tendra wo she nga so sim tini jondrshe go na kale tini thapshi go ni jondrshe go re.
So we need to train our minds using an approach and a method like this, just as we would train or tame an animal like a horse or an elephant, so too do we need to train our minds.
Teni thapshi tela teni kale teni nga so simte halipa pe na so chisu shekanda ota karma nyesheta teni na la nin sim chigtola pe na nyang gomna nyang chi changba ma to ba jang musamba da teni yang karte nyarji ma gumne nga so jirni da bogomna sem gna la teni chisu shekanda chisu chingja teni zgna la teni nam tok jamba chig me pa shini teni ha chang teni jiwa teni zgna la ne thap kres.
And if we apply this approach, then it will be possible for us for a period of 20 minutes or half an hour, to remain in concentration on our particular object of meditation, whether it be compassion or whether it be a shamatha practice. We will be able to remain in a state of single-pointed concentration on our object of meditation.
Then Jamso na la long jamni teni ralub chimbo yongo yowi kapsa teni long temar me pare sona teni jamso ngo la lab me pa teni jamso ngo par teni to lab chichi me pa teni demo rendo re pena tendra bore ne semte par demo rendo res. And
this will enable us to bring a great peace to our minds, just as an ocean, when there's a great wind blows and then the waves churn up and it's very violent and choppy. When the wind subsides, then so too do the waves, and the ocean face becomes very calm. We can achieve the same result with our minds.
Teni kartenga su nimare la, teni karma nyeshendao, chisu shekanda, chisu chingda, teni rela, teni gomthap sona, teni ngasu sem kanala yopi teni dungwar mambota, teni non shikta, teni tongser kana tawan rawota, tosu tsangma, teni tin mebashin rawores.
And if we can persevere in this kind of practice daily for 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour, then much of our mental suffering, our pressure, depression, etc. can really be reduced.
Then rovi gimsan ta kangrezena teni ngaso tongser kana diennanja, teni non shikena sem marke payenanja, teso tamchipo ngaso sem ganala teni namtong ramada mambo hajang mambo kini teni tindi samlo dugbo mambo tang teni shipi gimsanji teni to sem marke pa chakbares.
And the reason that this kind of approach is effective for feelings of unhappiness or stress or depression is that in fact these mental states emerge from our minds.
Ate sem namtok mambo kievjak pi gimsanji sem marke pa sonwarese. Sem namtok mambo kievjak pi gimsanji sem marke pa re sonwarese.
Yes, so it's a result that these states are brought about due to the fact that our minds are generating a lot of negative thoughts, and these are responsible for the suffering in our minds.
Tani tal nam tok te so tam chupo me pare ne tini sem jewa re song ine kamna tini jewa ti nala dungur chi yo mare jewa ti nala dungur yo mare tini jewa te ti nala yin rambo da one thamna tini dungur samati nala jine pena nam khane khawa bavna so nala khawa bavna tini so nala khawa bavna so nani tini shirin ro re pena tin ra bores.
And if we can maintain this practice or extend this practice over a period of time, then the sufferings in our mind will cease to exist, like snow falling into a lake that simply melts away. So it will be when negative thoughts arise in our minds.
Teni tingani teni nyarje tang teni sem kebo da teni yonga teni sem hachan kebo yonga tang teni sem kanala nyarje tang to so yakpo kini teni je yong gres.
And with this state, then compassion and the nyungjiedang.
Nyarje ki gre te sem kipo yong gres.
Oh, yeah, but that we will be able to generate compassion well, and our minds will generate happiness.
Ota teni indi teni ngaso gum tambo te tere te tarong tela jipcha she go re nge terang sha chitum dordi tambo zre jipcha te chu teni re chorang so namba ga teni jong la teni tarong jimo tani teni shena teni tinala gum tham ram ra haliba mambondu te so kang gum na chokore tela tarong jipcha te go res.
So this first type of the first kind of meditation that I've described today has just been a very brief and simple introduction. The Buddhist tradition offers much more detailed instructions on how to engage in this kind of meditation, and if this is something that you are interested in pursuing, then the Buddhist tradition offers more detailed descriptions on how this can be done.
Tani gum te tini soso tini pecha tani soso yige tani gumna yakbo yong mare te ina mana tela gum par chengkeng ge gergen zu go rese tini gergen khorang la ina tini gum gyabya ge nyamyong yakbo yong keng ge tini gergen zu ge tini par lob go rese tini tin samne nga so rang ge lobjong yakbo shi chai wi jis tini rang ge tini rang ge chimni gumna tin zhe ge rese.
It's usually not effective for us to simply learn meditation by reading books ourselves and sort of self-teaching, as it were. In order to practice well, we need to have a meditation teacher who has achieved some experience themselves. And after we have learnt well under their instruction, then we can continue with this practice in our own homes.
Teni goni gum nyamnyong yong kan teni zika teni chidna teni ranga gum te kale yajin jo reze tambo ngaso pena gum nyima chingda zangkur chingda teni zala gum jabna ti nala yaji chimbo rogo mare ta te kyo mare kale rogo re ngaso jang rambo la ta go re ma to ngaso zangkur chingda bola gum ni te yakbo mayona o tangi gum shisa mare samne yugjana tin jika mare jinkyong go reze.
So under this proper instruction, gradually our meditation will progress. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 1 week. We need to persist in our practice. It's not something that we should cast aside because we don't feel we've got immediate results with.
And
this is the first kind of meditation that we're going to talk about today.
This
kind of meditation is called shamatha. The second kind of meditation today, due to time, I'm probably not going to be able to talk about in great detail, but what it is a meditation that is based on the calmness that we've established with the first kind of meditation, looking at the essence of the heart, and it's not the heart of the mind, and understanding, in fact, what the nature of the mind really is.
And the
benefit of understanding or knowing the nature of the mind is that all of our sufferings, whether great or small, in fact, originate from not knowing this. So this involves us appreciating that all of our happiness or attachments or unhappinesses are in fact just like dreams.
Teni mulum watawaz teni shisona teni ngazo pena mulum ganala mulum yeba shisona dungur mepan jawo reyongres.
And upon knowing this, it's just like discovering in a dream that one is simply just having a dream.
Yena tine kamna ngazo nyarji teni yarji sindore nyarji kena teni chokore ngazo njikchakta teni khongchoda teni tso meparin jore ta yena nyarji ndawota tso sama yarji chevzang jores.
But our compassion will continue to increase and to develop. Our negative emotions, our suffering, our fear, etc., these will disappear.
Teni ti kapsang aso teni randu kasamlo mamboda, teni khungchoda, khunzanda, teni tejig teni ta nyomumba sama mepa chakares.
And at this point, our various negative feelings of resentment and anger, etc., will subside.
Teni nyarji yarji song jimsenji teni tinai kamna ngacho monnamla teni phamba mambo drib kare, teni jampan tela teni ta leka ta drib kare.
Nyungje teni.
Nyarji ki jimsenji jampan ki leka legres.
And the reason that our compassion continues to develop is that we are engaging, or that we are working for the benefit of others.
Teni jampang leka ta mambo lena teni tinane soso ranga teni matse tondang dambarin jores.
And when we do a lot of work for the benefit of others, then our life becomes very meaningful.
Teni matse tondang dambare patang tedang nyamde teni sosoranga dewa tang kepang ngomatang atsuti jampar dribna tinang ne yongres.
And while our life is in addition to our lives becoming more meaningful, we realize that true happiness and joy, in fact, is derived from benefiting and helping others.
Teni ngatso jantun dribata jampan dribala tinni teni shongwi dewate teni dewa ngomate rese.
So this happiness that is derived from helping others is ultimate happiness.
Teni terang ngaso shito teni chachet teni ngaso shatsarson teni tsamaga tarong yang jipchashini lojong yakboshini teni gomjabro chis teni jabachi me sama yakbo nyansong tji chis.
And that brings to an end this afternoon's teaching. May everybody study well and meditate well. Thank you all for listening.